In the quiet spring of 1933, the sleepy town of Joplin, Missouri, was about to become a household name, all thanks to a group of outlaws renting a small garage apartment. They were quiet, keeping to themselves, drawing cards and drinking beer. The neighbors thought they were just a rowdy bunch of young people. But this was no ordinary group. It was the notorious Barrow Gang, led by Clyde Barrow and his partner, Bonnie Parker. Life on the run was a constant grind. The gang Clyde, his brother Buck, Buck's wife Blanche, Bonnie, and their young associate W.D. Jones needed a place to lie low. Joplin seemed perfect. They could rest, clean their arsenal of weapons, and plan their next move. They paid their rent, bought groceries, and for a short while, it seemed like they had found a temporary peace. But in their line of work, peace is always fleeting. The local authorities in Joplin had been getting reports of suspicious activity. Some neighbors noticed the group's Texas license plates and their late-night card games. It wasn't much to go on, but it was enough to spark suspicion. A plan was hatched. On April 13th, a small team of lawmen, thinking they were about to bust some local bootleggers, organized a raid. It was supposed to be a simple, routine operation. It turned into anything but. The 5 officers pulled up to the apartment building, expecting an easy arrest. But Clyde Barrow was notoriously paranoid. He never let his guard down. As the police approached, Clyde and W.D. Jones were just about to leave. The moment they saw the officers, they didn't hesitate. They opened fire. The quiet afternoon erupted into a storm of gunfire. The police were completely caught off guard, outgunned by the gang's Browning automatic rifles. The shootout was brutal and short. 2 of the officers, Detective Harry McGinnis and Constable J.W. Wes Harriman, were killed almost instantly. The remaining officers were pinned down as the gang made their escape. Amid the chaos, the Barrow Gang scrambled into their car. Clyde, firing wildly, managed to get the car started, and they sped away, leaving a scene of carnage and shock behind them. They had escaped, but they paid a price. W.D. Jones was wounded, and the gang had to abandon almost everything they owned in their haste. Back at the blood-stained garage apartment, the surviving officers and detectives began to sift through what the gang had left behind. What they found was a treasure trove. There were weapons, poems written by Bonnie, and Buck Barrow's parole papers. But the most significant discovery was a small, undeveloped roll of film. They had no idea what was on it, but they had it developed immediately. And this is where the story of Bonnie and Clyde transforms from a local crime report into a national legend. When the photos were printed, the police were stunned. These weren't your typical grim-faced mugshots. Instead, they saw a series of playful, almost theatrical images. There was Bonnie Parker, cigar in her mouth, pistol in her hand, playfully holding up Clyde at gunpoint. There was another of her, foot propped on the bumper of their Ford V8, rifle resting on her hip, a confident smirk on her face. Clyde was pictured with his guns, looking like a movie gangster. These weren't just criminals, they were performers. They were documenting their lives, creating their own mythos. The photos were raw, intimate, and utterly captivating. Up to this point, Bonnie and Clyde were just 2 more names on a long list of Depression-era outlaws. But these images changed everything. The newspapers got a hold of the photos, and they splashed them across front pages all over the country. The Joplin Globe was the first, and soon, news syndicates spread the images from coast to coast. The public was instantly fascinated. Here were these young, attractive criminals, living a life of danger and rebellion. The photos humanized them, gave them a personality that transcended their crimes. The image of Bonnie with the cigar and gun became iconic. It was scandalous, alluring, and completely shattered the public's perception of what a female criminal should be. It didn't matter that Bonnie likely never smoked cigars, and was probably more of a lookout than a shooter. The image was what mattered. It portrayed her as a cigar-smoking gun moll, a tough, equal partner in crime. The media had its story, and it ran with it. Bonnie and Clyde were no longer just robbers and murderers. They were now folk heroes, romantic anti-establishment figures. In the depths of the Great Depression, when banks were foreclosing on farms and families were losing everything, many people felt a certain resentment towards the authorities and financial institutions. Bonnie and Clyde were seen as rebels fighting against a system that had failed them. The public's fascination grew, fueled by the steady stream of newspaper articles. Their exploits were detailed, often exaggerated, turning them into modern-day Robin Hoods, even though they mostly robbed small grocery stores and gas stations, not big banks. The poems Bonnie wrote, which were also found at Joplin, added another layer to their story. They revealed a sense of doom, a poetic awareness of their inevitable fate. One of her most famous poems, The Story of Bonnie and Clyde, ended with the lines, "Someday they'll go down together, and they'll bury them side by side. To a few, it'll be grief to the law relief, but it's death for Bonnie and Clyde." This blend of violence, romance, and poetic fatalism was irresistible. People began to root for them, to follow their story like a serialized drama. The love story aspect was particularly powerful. The idea of this devoted couple, loyal to each other against the world, was incredibly romantic. They were seen as star-crossed lovers on a wild, tragic adventure. Their deep loyalty was real. Clyde once orchestrated a daring prison break to free a former gang member, and Bonnie, despite her injuries from a car crash that left her with a severe leg burn, never left his side. This romanticized image, however, was a stark contrast to the brutal reality of their lives. They were constantly on the move, sleeping in their car, living in fear, and leaving a trail of dead bodies in their wake, including at least 9 law enforcement officers. Life on the run was anything but glamorous. It was dirty, painful, and terrifying. But the myth was more powerful than the reality. The Joplin photos had given them an identity, a brand. They were no longer just Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. They were Bonnie and Clyde, a single entity, a symbol of rebellion and doomed love. This public image, born from a roll of film left behind in a hasty escape, made them immortal. The Joplin shootout was a turning point. It cost the gang dearly in terms of their anonymity and led to increased pressure from law enforcement. But it also cemented their place in American folklore. It was the moment they stepped out of the shadows and onto the national stage, not just as criminals, but as cultural icons. The images of them playful and defiant would outlive their violent deeds and ensure that the story of Bonnie and Clyde would be told and retold for generations to come, a fascinating cautionary tale of love, crime, and the power of a single photograph. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this piece of history, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.